All right, thank you, Connor. Your time now is 6:45. We're continuing coverage now. There is more controversy regarding Jeffrey Epstein and President Trump after recently released emails claim the president knew about Epstein's conduct. Our Nathaniel Reed joins us now. And Nate, we know there will be a vote in the House pushing for more files to be released. What's the chances of this passing, and what's been the White House's response?
Yeah, Gabby, the question is not whether it passes. The question is by how much it's going to pass. And we know this because of the way that this bill came up for a vote in the first place. Republicans, some Republicans, but mostly Democrats, signing on to what's called a discharge petition, effectively to try and force Speaker Johnson to hold a vote on releasing the Epstein files. Ultimately, when Congresswoman Adelita Grijalva, who was sworn in earlier this week after waiting 50 days to be sworn in, she signed on, as per her pledge, to this discharge petition, becoming the 218th critical signature.
Okay, so here we need to talk about what just happened, because this is absolutely insane. The Supreme Court just torched Donald Trump's entire legal defense strategy, like completely obliterated it. And now Congress is moving faster than we've ever seen to actually remove him from office. Yeah, you heard that right. Remove him. Not impeach and then let it die in the Senate like last time. We're talking actual removal. And this is all happening right now while you're watching this video. So here's what you need to understand. For months, Trump and his lawyers have been arguing that he has total immunity, complete protection from prosecution for basically anything he did as president. Anything at all. The argument was pretty simple. Presidents need to make tough decisions, and they can't be second-guessing themselves, worrying about getting charged with crimes later. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, the Supreme Court just said, nope, not how this works. Not even close. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest. You can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
To force a vote on releasing the Epstein files, 218 was the magic number. When they hit that magic number, it compelled Speaker Johnson to force scheduling a vote on releasing Epstein files. He now says he's going to hold that vote this coming week. The question is not whether it'll pass, because, look, 218 people, the majority of the House of Representatives, have already said they're going to vote for this thing. The question is how many additional Republicans could join ranks with a handful of their colleagues to vote in favor of this bill passing. One of the Republicans who backed this discharge petition effort in the first place, Congressman Thomas Massie, the Republican from Kentucky, who's frequently drawn the ire of President Donald Trump, telling me earlier this week his message to skeptical colleagues: get on the right side of history. Take a listen.
My colleagues who are thinking about which way they should vote on that, they can get protection from the president if they vote the wrong way. In other words, if they vote for the cover-up, the president will take care of them in their primary. But this vote will last longer than the president will be in office.
And certainly the political ramifications, too, of whether the voters will punish the party in power, Republicans, if they don't release all of these Epstein files come the 2026 midterm elections. So, okay, it's past the House of Representatives. Let's move on to the other chamber, the U.S. Senate. No guarantee that this bill comes up for a vote. And if it does come up for a vote, which, again, seems at least a little bit unlikely, it would need bipartisan support. Those 60 votes in the Senate, that threshold for passing that pretty much every piece of legislation needs. So, okay, let's say it passes the Senate, passes the House of Representatives, gets to the White House. The president does not appear to back this. There was reporting this week that he'd reached out to some of the Republicans.
The ruling came down 6-3. And get this, it wasn't even the liberal justices who destroyed him. Trump appointed 3 of these justices himself. 3 of them. And they still ruled against his blanket immunity claim. Can you believe this? The court said, yeah, sure, presidents have absolute immunity for core official acts, things that are directly part of the job, but for unofficial conduct, for personal stuff, for things that have nothing to do with running the country, zero protection. None. And here's the kicker. They sent his case back to a lower court to figure out which parts of what he did were official and which parts weren't. So now we've got judges going through everything Trump did with a microscope, trying to separate official presidential business from personal schemes. And while that's happening, Congress isn't just sitting around waiting. They're moving fast, like really fast. In May of this year, members of Congress introduced articles of impeachment, 7 different areas of alleged abuse, obstruction of justice, violation of appropriations powers, bribery, The whole list. And at the time, everyone thought, okay, here we go again. Another impeachment that goes nowhere. But then the Supreme Court dropped this ruling and suddenly everything changed. Legal experts are now saying the House will impeach Trump, possibly as soon as next month. Next month. We're talking weeks away here, people. Not months, not years. Weeks. And it's not just impeachment talk anymore. Major media outlets and editorial boards across the country are calling for immediate removal. Some are even pushing for the 25th Amendment. You know the one, where the vice president and cabinet declare the president unfit for office and just remove him. They're citing insurrection. They're citing threats to democracy. They're saying this can't wait for a normal impeachment process. Think about what that means. Think about the timeline here. The Supreme Court rules that Trump doesn't have immunity. Congress immediately escalates impeachment efforts. Media starts demanding 25th Amendment removal. All of this in the span of a few months. And we're supposed to believe this is all just normal political process? Come on. Here's what makes this even more wild. The Supreme Court decision doesn't just affect Trump's current legal problems. It redefines presidential accountability for everyone going forward. Future presidents. Current candidates if Trump somehow wasn't in office. Everyone. The standards just changed. The rules just got rewritten. And nobody really knows what this means long term. Financial markets are already reacting. Public trust in government institutions is tanking even further than it already was. Immigration debates are getting more heated because nobody knows if current policies will survive a potential removal. Everything is connected to this. Everything. And the timing? Suspicious doesn't even begin to cover it. We've got national elections on the horizon. Voter turnout projections are all over the place because nobody knows what the political landscape will even look like in a few months. Will Trump still be president? Will there be a new Republican candidate? Will this energize Democrats or split the country even further? The stakes here are absolutely massive. This isn't just about one president or one court case. This is about whether the rule of law actually means anything anymore. It's about whether Congress can actually remove a sitting president or if impeachment is just political theater that never goes anywhere. It's about whether the Supreme Court is still an independent branch of government or if it's become just another political weapon. So yeah, buckle up. Because what happens in the next few weeks is going to determine the future of American democracy. Not exaggerating, not being dramatic. This is actually happening right now. And most people have no idea how serious this really is. Let's break down exactly what the Supreme Court said and why it matters so much. Alright, so let's get into the actual Supreme Court ruling because the details here are wild. Like absolutely wild. And most people totally misunderstand what the court actually said. The headlines make it sound like Trump lost completely. But it's way more complicated than that, and honestly way more dangerous depending on how you look at it. The case is called Trump versus United States. Catchy, right? It was decided on July 1st, and the vote was 6-3. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority opinion. Now here's what they actually ruled. Presidents have absolute immunity for core constitutional powers. Absolute, meaning they cannot be prosecuted for official acts that fall under their direct constitutional authority. Things like commanding the military, appointing federal officers, vetoing legislation. That stuff is completely protected. But then there's this other category, unofficial acts, personal conduct, things the president does that have nothing to do with constitutional duties. And for those things, no immunity at all. Zero. You can be prosecuted just like any other citizen. The problem is figuring out which category different actions fall into. And that's where this gets messy. The Supreme Court didn't make that determination themselves. They punted it back to a lower court. So now Judge Tanya Chutkan in D.C. has to go through Trump's indictment piece by piece and decide what was official and what was unofficial. And both sides are going to fight over every single detail, every conversation, every meeting, every phone call. Was it official presidential business or personal scheming? Good luck figuring that out. Let me give you an example of how complicated this gets. Trump had conversations with Justice Department officials about election fraud claims. Is that an official act? He's the president. The Justice Department reports to him. Sounds official, right? But if those conversations were about using the Justice Department to overturn an election he lost, then maybe it's not official, maybe it's personal, maybe it's criminal. See how this works? Everything becomes a gray area. And here's what really matters. The Supreme Court said that when determining whether something is official or not, courts can't even look at the president's motives, can't consider why he did something, only what he did. So if the action itself looks official, it gets immunity, even if the reason behind it was totally corrupt. Think about that for a second. A president could do something that technically falls under presidential powers, but do it for completely personal corrupt reasons and still be protected. Are you kidding me? This is what legal experts are freaking out about. The ruling actually expands presidential power in some ways while limiting it in others. It creates this massive gray zone where presidents can potentially get away with a lot more than we thought, as long as they can argue their actions were tied to official duties, which is pretty much everything a president does. But wait, it gets better. The court also said that official presidential communications are off limits as evidence, even if they're trying to prove unofficial conduct. So you can't use official conversations to show corrupt intent. You can't connect the dots using White House meetings and memos. The wall between official and unofficial acts is basically impenetrable, which makes prosecuting any president way harder than it already was. Now let's talk about Congress, because this is where things get really interesting. Back in May, before the Supreme Court ruling, members of Congress introduced House Resolution 353, Articles of Impeachment against Trump, 7 specific charges. Let me run through them real quick. Article 1, obstruction of justice, interfering with federal investigations. Article 2, abuse of power through improper use of presidential authority. Article 3, violation of appropriations powers, spending money Congress didn't authorize. Article 4, bribery and corruption, trading official acts for personal benefit. Article 5, undermining democratic processes. Article 6, endangering national security. Article 7, violating the constitutional rights of citizens. That's a lot, like a really comprehensive list of alleged misconduct. And when it was introduced, most political analysts thought, okay, this is just symbolic. It'll never get enough votes. The Republican-controlled House won't impeach one of their own. Standard political theater. But then the Supreme Court dropped their immunity ruling, and everything shifted. Suddenly, legal experts started saying, wait, this might actually happen. The Heritage Foundation, which is a conservative think tank, published analysis in November saying it's highly likely the House will impeach Trump, possibly as soon as next month. These aren't random political commentators. This is a major conservative organization saying impeachment is probable, not possible, probable. Why the change? Because the Supreme Court ruling gave political cover to Republicans who want Trump gone, but didn't want to look like they were being disloyal. Now they can say, hey, we're not making a political decision here. The Supreme Court said he doesn't have immunity. We're just following the law. We're upholding accountability. It gives them an excuse to vote for impeachment without fully turning on their base. And it's not just impeachment talk. Multiple editorial boards and political commentators are calling for use of the 25th Amendment, immediate removal without waiting for an impeachment trial. The argument goes like this. Trump's actions constitute insurrection. He's a threat to democracy. Waiting for the slow impeachment process puts the country at risk. The vice president and cabinet need to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him now. There's literally a document that was circulated in Congress titled Support for the Removal of Donald J. Trump from Office. It lays out the 25th Amendment argument in detail, cites his actions as meeting the threshold for being unable to discharge the powers and duties of the office, and it's got signatures, real members of Congress backing this approach. Now here's what nobody's talking about, the political calculation behind all this. Democrats obviously want Trump gone. They've wanted him gone since day one of his second term. But Republicans, it's more complicated. Some genuinely believe he's committed impeachable offenses. Some think he's become a liability for the party. Some want to clear the way for other Republican candidates in future elections. And some are just tired of the chaos. But they're all terrified of Trump's base. His supporters are loyal, extremely loyal. Any Republican who votes to impeach Trump is risking their political career. They'll get primaried. They'll get death threats. Their families will be harassed. So they need cover. They need a reason they can point to that isn't just I personally don't like Trump. The Supreme Court ruling gives them that cover. And the timing matters here too. We're far enough from the last election that voters' memories are fading, but close enough to the next election cycle that removing Trump could still benefit Republicans if they play it right. They can say we cleaned house, we held our own accountable, we're the party of law and order, vote for us. It's all calculated. Meanwhile, Trump's legal team is scrambling. They built their entire defense strategy on immunity. That was the play. Delay, and argue immunity until either the cases go away or Trump gets reelected and makes it all disappear. But now that strategy is falling apart. The lower courts are going to pick apart what's official and what's not. And even if Trump wins some battles, he's going to lose others, which means some charges are going forward, which means trials, which means potential convictions. And you know what happens if a sitting president gets convicted of federal crimes? Nobody really knows because it's never happened before. Does he automatically get removed? Does Congress have to impeach anyway? Can he pardon himself? These are literally unprecedented legal questions. The Constitution doesn't have clear answers. We're in completely uncharted territory here. The Brennan Center for Justice published analysis saying the Supreme Court's immunity ruling undermines democracy. Their argument is that it creates a two-tier system. Presidents get special protections regular citizens don't have, and even though the court limited immunity to official acts, the definitions are so vague and the evidentiary rules are so restrictive that presidents can still get away with a lot. It's accountability theater. It looks like justice, but doesn't actually deliver it. So where does all this leave us? Trump's immunity defense is shattered. Congress is actively moving toward impeachment. Some are pushing for 25th Amendment removal. Legal experts think it's going to happen soon, and the entire system is being stress tested in ways we've never seen before. But here's the question nobody's asking. What happens to the country if this actually goes through? If Congress removes a sitting president, what happens to his supporters who think this is all a setup? What happens to the international stage where allies and enemies are watching America tear itself apart? What happens to the economy when half the country thinks their leader was stolen from them and the other half thinks justice was finally served? These aren't small questions. These are existential questions about the future of the country, and we're about to get answers whether we're ready for them or not. Let's break this down into the core points you need to understand, because this is where it all comes together. And trust me, you're going to want to pay attention to this part because it's where everything connects. Point 1, the Supreme Court created a new framework for presidential accountability, and nobody fully understands it yet. On paper, it sounds reasonable. Official acts get immunity, unofficial acts don't. Simple, right? Wrong. Because who decides what's official? Judges. And different judges are going to have different interpretations. This case is going to create decades of legal battles over where the line is. Every future president is going to test these boundaries. Every prosecutor is going to argue about what counts as official. The court basically created more questions than it answered. And here's the scary part. The ruling gives presidents an incentive to make everything look official, wrap personal decisions in official-looking processes, have meetings with White House staff instead of personal lawyers, route communications through official channels, create a paper trail that suggests everything was about presidential duties, even when it wasn't. Smart presidents with good lawyers can use this framework to shield almost anything. It's a loophole disguised as accountability. Think about what this means going forward. Any president who wants to push boundaries now has a roadmap. Make sure your corrupt actions involve official government channels. Document everything as official business. Keep your personal motives hidden. Don't write down the real reasons in emails or memos. And boom, you're probably protected. The Supreme Court just handed future presidents a guide to getting away with stuff. And you know what's wild? The 3 justices Trump appointed voted for this framework. They helped create the very system that might protect Trump, but will definitely protect future presidents. It's like they built him a shield, but accidentally built everyone else an even bigger one. Whether that was intentional or not, I'll let you decide. Point 2, Congress is more serious about removal than ever before, but it's still a long shot. Yeah, legal experts say impeachment is likely. Yeah, there are articles already introduced. Yeah, some people are pushing the 25th Amendment, but actually removing a president, that takes 2/3 of the Senate, 67 votes. Do you really think 67 senators are going to vote to convict Trump, even with the Supreme Court ruling? Even with all the pressure? History says no. Trump was impeached twice before. Both times the Senate acquitted him, and Republicans had way less to lose politically back then. Now, Trump's base is even more entrenched. The Republican Party is even more divided. Swing state senators are even more nervous about voter backlash. Getting to 67 votes would require a massive number of Republicans to break ranks, and that's just not realistic unless something even bigger comes out, something we haven't seen yet. The 25th Amendment route is even less likely. That requires the vice president to lead the charge, and the majority of the cabinet to agree. Trump's cabinet, people he appointed, people who owe their positions to him, are they really going to declare him unfit and remove him? Probably not. The 25th Amendment has never been used to remove a president against their will. It's designed for medical emergencies, not political controversies. Using it here would be a constitutional crisis on top of a constitutional crisis. But here's why Congress is still moving forward anyway. Impeachment isn't just about removal. It's about the record. It's about forcing Republicans to go on the record with their votes. It's about energizing political bases. Democrats get to show their supporters we tried to hold him accountable. Republicans who vote against impeachment get to show their supporters we stood with Trump. And Republicans who vote for impeachment get to say we put country over party. Everyone gets something out of it, politically, even if removal never happens. And let's be real. The media coverage alone is worth it for both sides. Democrats get months of headlines about Trump's alleged crimes. Republicans get to paint this as a partisan witch hunt. Cable news ratings go through the roof. Political fundraising explodes. Everyone benefits except maybe the American people, who just want the government to focus on actual problems like inflation and healthcare and jobs. Point 3. This fight is really about the 2026 midterms and beyond. Everything happening right now is positioning for the next election cycle. Democrats want Trump damaged and distracted. They want his approval ratings tanking. They want voters disgusted by scandal and chaos. Impeachment does that even without removal. It dominates the news. It makes everything harder for Trump's agenda. It bleeds support from moderate voters who are just tired of the drama. Republicans have different calculations. Some want Trump weakened so other candidates can emerge. Some want him gone entirely so the party can move on. But others want him to survive because he still commands the biggest portion of the Republican base. So they're threading this needle. Criticize him enough to look principled. Support him enough to avoid getting primaried. It's political survival calculus. And voters? Most people aren't paying close attention to Supreme Court immunity doctrines. They're not reading articles of impeachment. They're watching gas prices. They're worried about inflation. They're thinking about their jobs and their families. This whole legal drama feels distant to them, but it's going to matter when they vote. If Trump's still in office and the economy is struggling, he's done. If he gets removed and Republicans rally around a new candidate, they might have a chance. If Democrats overplay their hand and look like they're just trying to overturn elections, they'll lose support. Everything is connected. The 2026 midterms could completely reshape Congress. If Trump survives impeachment, his supporters will be energized and angry. They'll turn out in massive numbers to punish Republicans who voted against him. But if the economy tanks, or if more scandals emerge, moderate voters might flip Democratic. It's impossible to predict right now. Too many variables. Too much chaos. Point 4. The real consequences are happening outside Washington. Financial markets hate uncertainty. And right now, there's massive uncertainty about who's going to be running the country in 6 months. That affects investment decisions. It affects hiring. It affects economic growth. We're already seeing volatility. If this impeachment process drags on for months, the economic impact could be significant. Immigration policy is in flux because nobody knows if current enforcement priorities will survive a leadership change. Federal agencies are paralyzed because they don't know if their bosses will still be in charge next month. International allies are nervous because they don't know if American commitments are reliable. Adversaries are watching to see if America is too distracted to respond to threats. The ripple effects go everywhere. And public trust, already at historic lows. This makes it worse. Half the country thinks Trump is a criminal who should be in prison. The other half thinks this is a political witch hunt. There's no middle ground anymore. No shared reality. Everyone lives in their own information bubble, their own version of events, their own set of facts. How do you run a democracy when people can't even agree on basic reality? Social media makes this worse. Algorithms push people toward more extreme content. Conspiracy theories spread faster than fact checks. Everyone's convinced they're right, and everyone else is brainwashed. It's not just political division anymore. It's epistemic division. People don't just disagree about policy. They disagree about what's true and what's false, what's real and what's fake. That's way more dangerous than normal political fighting. Here's what happens next. The lower court is going to spend weeks or months determining which parts of Trump's indictment involve official acts and which don't. Both sides will appeal everything. This could drag into next year easily. Meanwhile, Congress is going to move forward with impeachment hearings. Witnesses will testify. Evidence will be presented. It'll be a media circus. Republicans will defend Trump. Democrats will attack him. Nothing will surprise anyone because everyone already knows what they think. If, and this is a big if, but if the House actually votes to impeach the Senate, we'll hold a trial. It'll be televised. It'll be dramatic. It'll accomplish nothing because there's no way 67 senators vote to convict unless something massive changes. So Trump survives, claims victory, says he was vindicated. His supporters believe him. His opponents think justice failed, and we're right back where we started. But here's the thing. The Supreme Court ruling changed the game permanently. Future presidents now know exactly how far they can push. They know what's protected and what's not. They know how to structure their actions to maximize immunity. They know the loopholes, and some of them will use this knowledge in ways that make Trump look tame by comparison. That's the real danger here. Not what Trump did, but what the next person will do with the roadmap. The Supreme Court just provided. Imagine a president who's actually smart about exploiting these rules. Someone who understands the legal framework and carefully plans everything to fall under official acts. Someone who builds in deniability and plausible official justifications for everything. That president could do enormous damage while staying completely immune from prosecution. The Supreme Court didn't just rule on Trump. They set precedent for everyone who comes after. So yeah, this story matters. It matters way more than most people realize. Because it's not just about Trump. It's about presidential power. It's about accountability. It's about whether the law applies equally to everyone, or if some people really are above it. And we're about to find out which version of America we're actually living in. The next few months are going to be absolutely wild. We're going to see legal battles, political theater, maybe actual removal proceedings, definitely a lot of chaos. And through it all, the American people are going to be watching, trying to figure out what's real and what's spin. Stay tuned, because this is just getting started. Next time, we're diving into exactly what happens if Trump actually does get removed. Who takes over? What policies change? How does the Republican Party survive it? And what does this mean for American democracy long term? You're not going to want to miss that one. This is history happening in real time, folks, and we're all living through it, whether we like it or not.